Hi, my friends. Today I have Amy Vale on the podcast, and I'm so excited to share what she offers you and her journey on how she got there. So, welcome, Amy. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah. So, I was looking through your products. For the Cubs is where the products are at. But before we jump into that, I would love to know your journey because you had such an amazing long journey to get where you are right now.
Absolutely. It's a long one for sure. I actually originally grew up in the outback of Australia. I grew up watching all of these amazing TV shows that were set in New York. And so from about the age 10, I had my sights set on moving to New York. And when I was about 25, I moved to New York on my own, didn't know a soul. I
Brave.
felt I felt like I had a lot to prove for some reason. I think coming from a very small country town in the outback,
Mhm.
you want to get access to opportunity. And so for me, New York was the place where the most opportunity could be in my mind.
Yeah.
And so I worked there for a good decade
Mhm.
with some really great brands, Charity Water, Spotify, and a handful of others in marketing leadership. And then my husband and I slowly were sort of moving out of the city, wanting a little bit calmer pace. And so Austin, Texas, seemed to be a really great quality of life.
Nice.
And so we moved to Austin, Texas. The company I was working for, they actually got acquired very shortly after I joined, and started consulting. I always knew I wanted to start my own brand. I just wasn't sure, like, specifically what I wanted the brand to be about. And so we actually started training to become foster parents not long after we had come to Austin. I had never had the desire to have kiddos of my own, biological children. And this felt particularly important to me because I grew up with backpackers who would come and work on my parents' property.
Mhm.
And we stayed in contact with a gentleman that worked on our property for years and years. And I watched him, through his job, go to Africa, adopt a child, and see the impact that that had had on them. And so it really had sort of imprinted in me. That idea of opportunity felt really important in so many different contexts. And
Mhm.
so foster care for us really felt like one of those opportunities to serve families in our community. I think oftentimes people get confused with the role of foster care, um, that it's just looking after the child. But if you sort of zoom out a little, it's really about supporting families because the ultimate goal with foster care is reunification. We
Mhm.
want those kiddos to go back to their families once they've done the work and gotten to a place where they're healthy enough to be able to care for them again. And so we sort of think about it in that context. Um, so what an amazing honor to be there for families in some of the hardest chapters of their lives and really care for and nurture a child while their family does the work, to be able to offer that to them when they're reunified. So as we're going through that, I was learning a lot about trauma, about the nervous system, about um, really how to sort of manage and cope through really difficult situations. And as someone who has lived with anxiety and depression and ADHD, those were things that were starting to really resonate with me because I was like, a lot of these things aren't just related to trauma with a capital T, they're about regulating your body and helping get through really difficult times. Like there's a really fun trend on TikTok about like your body not knowing whether you're being chased by a bear or whether you have a meeting next, those kinds of things. And so really sort of looking at that through the lens of how can we help parents navigate really difficult times when they're raising kiddos, through eating, sleeping, and soothing. There's sort of three really important things that happen to nurture kiddos when they're brought into the home from birth. And so I really started looking into that. I learned that we needed 8 to 12 hugs a day for emotional well-being. And that was something that really dawned on me in terms of like the importance of just really simple connection and support and comfort.
Yeah.
So that's how Percy came to be, the weighted hug bear. That's how For the Cubs came to be. That was my idea. Um, And the sort of piece of it that was really surprising to me is, yes, like lots of parents responded very positively to Percy and the products that For the Cubs offers. But what I wasn't realizing was a lot of adults were as well.
Mm.
So they were actually using Percy as a support, as a comfort to process their anxiety and navigate their day-to-day struggles. And so what we're doing now is actually moving towards supporting adults with anxiety, depression, ADHD, and really sort of focusing on how I can support other folks that are experiencing that. Because as someone who's lived through it my entire life,
Mhm.
and I say like I've graduated therapy, I spent probably PhD levels on learning about myself and who I am
Yeah.
in therapy. And so to be on the other side of that and have learned all of the tools and coping mechanisms and processes through both going through the process of therapy and also finding things to give myself comfort in between those sessions,
Mhm.
but also learning so much about trauma and the nervous system. That's sort of how now I feel like For the Cubs is able to serve people of all ages who need support and find more comfort every day.
Oh, I love that. That's great. Um, so many things that I want to ask you about from that. But definitely starting with fostering. I think a lot of people would like to know more about fostering. It seems to me, I'm a high school teacher as well. So I see the kids come in, I see the trauma they go through, and it's really hard for me sometimes not to take that home with me. So
Mhm.
as you're fostering, it seems like you also would have to take, like you're taking care of the children, which is amazing. And therefore, you're taking care of the families and really taking care of the communities by doing this. But how are you also like taking care of yourself so that you're able to do this?
Yes,
Hmm.
that is the tricky part of foster care is this really fun experience called secondary trauma.
Mm.
And that is really absorbing a lot of the trauma that the child is experiencing. It is very emotionally taxing when a child is having a triggered event, particularly because they can materialize and sort of present themselves in so many different ways that you don't actually know how to navigate it until you navigate it.
Hmm.
And so that can be really discombobulating when a child is like presenting a new articulation of their trauma and you haven't picked up the tools yet or haven't learned what works in that particular moment. And so a big thing that I really focus on is being realistic with my ability. Um, One of the things I think as a former people pleaser and overachiever is I want to do everything right. I want to be the perfect, expression of what it means to be a parent. I don't know whether there is one, so I don't know why I was striving for that. Um, and a lot that I have learned in foster care, especially to be able to show up in the best way that I can for the kids, is to really understand what my capacity is. Because a lot of foster parents will talk about how you need to be there for the hard times and you need to accept the complex aspects of trauma and accept the child for who they are. And that is all absolutely true. But it cannot be at the cost of your mental well-being, of your emotional well-being, of your ability to show up in your best way to support and serve that child. And I think that's where it gets really conflated very quickly. So a lot of what I do are the things that lean into a lot of the products that we offer at For the Cubs, um, which is the diffuser. So a lot of scent helps me calm down. One of the things that I learned at one of our first placements, I would play beach waves for the baby, and white noise wouldn't get her to sleep, but beach waves would. And I would find that when I'd be sitting there waiting for the baby to fully go to sleep in her crib, I would start to fall asleep.
Hmm.
And when I started to think about it, being near water, hearing beach waves, that is something that calms me down incredibly well. And what I learned is that actually being close to water or the sound of water actually just is, like, from a scientific perspective, lowers blood pressure and all of those great things to help you regulate. So that was sort of the big learning there, is it's not always sort of exactly what everyone talks about in terms of, oh, just have white noise and have this and have that. You kind of have to figure out the right mix for yourself.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, like with breathing, I would have my therapist say, place your hand on your heart. And I'm like, no, that does not feel comfortable for me. And a big part of that is like accepting that sometimes like the guidance that you're given and the tools that you're given, you need to like actually rework for your own
Mm.
support, because everyone's different in how they feel safe and comfortable. And so I really sort of focused on small rituals that help me regulate. Breathing is one of those things I'm not good at meditating. I can't sit still and just like clear my
Mm.
brain. That doesn't work with ADHD. Uh, so I think like the thing, finding the things that help me breathe, finding the things that help me regulate, but also just really appreciating like what I'm capable of. I know I'm
Mm.
capable of a lot, but I know that there are some things that I am not cut out for. And that's also okay too. And I think being a foster parent, I feel a lot of responsibility caring for other people's children. And so that's when I think about it from the context of like, this has nothing to do with me. So if I'm unable to give this child exactly what they need, then it's important for me to be able to articulate that, whether it be through like services, support, extra therapies, things like that, that can actually give them what they need because it's beyond my scope or my ability.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I resonate with a lot of what you're saying. First of all, I think that like all foster parents, maybe all parents should get classes. Like you should just get classes on how to take care of yourself. But I know
Okay.
I am not a foster parent, but I'm a step parent. So I got into this relationship and we had our girls full time. They were 3 and 6 at the time. And that was definitely a learning curve. And like you said, learning to put up almost those boundaries for yourself, knowing what you can and you can't do. Really a lot of lessons around that took a while, but getting
Mhm.
there. And as they get older, that changes and shifts. And also, like you said, learning what works for you. So I appreciate all of that. That's great stuff. Um, your teddy bear, I would love to know more about that because I think there's so many aspects of that teddy bear that work with this. And are you then going to make the teddy bear for adults? That's my question. Because it sounds amazing.
Yes. So the teddy bear is already for adults.
Yay.
That was the thing that I actually didn't anticipate.
Mhm.
I had lots of people buying for their grandkids or their kids, and certainly he was offering the support that they needed. But then I would start getting reviews and emails from women who were like, I have regular panic attacks. And Percy, for whatever reason, he's not the same as the other weighted supports that I have. Like he feels different. And he's offering me that calm. So whenever I get a panic attack, I'll rub his ear or I'll play with his weights are made of natural clay beads. And so they have like a gentle rustling sound. So there's like a sound aspect, there's a touch aspect. You can warm him or cool him. So there's a temperature aspect. And what I found was actually more adults were buying him than kids, like for kids. So
Well, I
I
think you said how many hugs a day should
8
we
to 12 we need.
12, even as adults, right? And how many adults
Mhm.
get 8 to 12 hugs? Like,
Yeah.
do we get any hugs some days? I don't even know. So
Yeah.
learning to use that teddy bear as a hug and giving yourself hugs, that's huge. I know I do like this one yoga movement where you hug yourself, and I love that. So having a teddy bear that you can do that too, that's amazing to get that hug.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a big part of it. I looked at all of the weighted supports out there, and in the sort of toy space, a lot of the weight is centered in the middle of the body,
Mm.
which is great and fine. But for folks who are wanting like the impact of a hug, and that regulation benefit,
Yeah.
Percy's weights are in his paws, so in all four of his arms and legs and in his body, and he's intentionally very floppy.
Yes.
So oftentimes they're very stuffed with the fill, but Percy, you'll sort of see him, he's a little bit like floppy and imperfect in the way that he's not like sitting up perfectly straight. And that's, I think, a great articulation of humanity because,
Yeah.
like everyone's a little different. Everyone sort of sits a little different and is, has their own way of showing up in the world. But also like it's so that he drapes over you and gives you that support.
Nice, nice. So in your story, you also mentioned your grandfather, and I just have to bring that up because my grandfather is somebody who was so special to me. I learned so much from, and I still know he's out there watching me. How did your grandfather influence you?
He was one of those people. I was very fortunate that my grandparents were very involved in my childhood. So I would spend weekends there. And he was one of those really interesting people. Now that I sort of think about his life and his story, he was someone who was really curious and always wanting to learn new things. And it was something that as a kid I didn't appreciate. But now that I look back on it as an adult, he had sort of picked up all of these different skills and like really sort of put time into getting good at things. And in his retirement days, he didn't actually retire, he was a jeweler.
Hmm.
So he would cut gemstones, and I would get to sit and watch him cut these, like turn this sort of very rough, relatively ugly looking rock into this beautiful sparkling stone. And to me, that was fascinating because
Ah,
there's so much precision and focus and intention behind how you would choose to cut this stone. But I would spend hours just sitting there being with him, watching him do those things. Or he loved gardening. So I got to learn about gardening, and he created a space in his own garden for me.
mm,
So I got to plant whatever I wanted. It looked like an absolute hot mess, but it was really fun to be able to do that. And he was just incredibly generous with his time and with his just with his energy and where he would choose to spend it. And so I think a lot of that, that was sort of a very safe space for me. And I often thought a lot about how like I could just show up as myself. I didn't have to protect any parts of me from him. He was
mhm.
very accepting and very welcoming of anyone and everyone. And so that was something that I sort of learned the importance of feeling like you belong somewhere. And that if I think about it, was like that was the thing I would take with him from our relationship is like you belong everywhere. And
Mhm.
you get to show up exactly as you are and who you are. And it's amazing what happens when people are able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that really correlates to you fostering kids because I'm sure that is something that you teach them in your own way as well. So,
Absolutely. And there's a lot of complexity there too, because kids are coming from places that are inherently usually pretty chaotic,
mm,
unstable. Oftentimes there's a misconception that parents don't love their kids. They have the feelings of love, but unfortunately sometimes like the articulation of love in creating safety or consistency or stability or meeting their needs, like that is where it falls down.
mhm,
So being able to say to a child, like, you can be anything you want to be, you are perfect exactly as you are, and just reinforcing that they have so much value to offer the world, and that calm, stability, focus, and really sort of being able to be relying on other people is okay. And I think that's something that with the kiddos we've cared for, I really focus on reinforcing. Every night we do affirmations where I have the kiddos say out loud in the mirror to themselves, like, I am strong, I am loved, I am loving, I am kind, I am brave, I am confident, I'm important, and I can be anything I want to be. Because if there's one thing I want them to take away from their time with us, other than this is what safety feels like in their nervous system,
mhm.
it's really that their potential is unlimited. Because I don't know whether when they go home that's going to be the first thing that their parents who've been working so hard to get their kids back in their home are going to be worried about. And so I just want them to be able to take that with them and hold on to it as long as they can.
Mm. Wow. What a gift you are to those kids. That is so amazing. Um, just kids in general need that, and that you're doing that with kids that are coming from trauma and from needy homes. I really appreciate that. That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, it's honestly like an honor. Oftentimes people will say, "Oh, the kiddos that come into your home, they're so lucky," and I'm like, I'm
Mhm.
lucky. Like,
Yeah.
I'm offering them safety and stability and consistency, and that's actually really unfamiliar to them. So that's actually not comfortable for
Mm.
them. However, what I get to learn and am reminded of constantly is showing up for people as a village. I know that a lot of our generation talks about like, where's my village?
Mhm.
I think one of the pieces of that is like you need to actually be a villager as well. And so being able to show up for families who oftentimes I never actually meet in person. Sometimes it's like it's just not safe or appropriate for me to have contact with family.
Mhm.
And so just knowing that I'm still serving in that capacity is really such an honor, because I always think like, oh my goodness, if I'm struggling to know that I'm going to have to say goodbye one day, imagine
Mhm.
what it was like when their child got removed from their home and they had no idea that was coming and how painful that was. And so being able to be there in that space feels
Mhm.
really, really important, but also just such an honor.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I definitely know that saying it takes a village, but you're right. You also have to be a part of that village.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I appreciate that. Um, so I know you said that you nurture yourself, and that's one question that I ask everybody who comes on here. How do you nurture yourself? And you said some breathing exercises. And is there anything that you do like on a daily base that you could share with us? Like one more thing that you could share with us?
Yeah. So I use Percy myself.
Yeah,
When I'm working, he's sitting on my lap.
nice.
It's very helpful for grounding, especially with ADHD. I'm medicated for it. It is amazingly helpful, but also like I still have tendencies. It doesn't like completely wipe out ADHD. So I need those sort of grounding, focusing supports. I will use the diffuser and the beach waves, like particularly if I've had like a very stressful meeting. Um, I'll be able to like go and just like take a couple minutes and just decompress from it. Oftentimes, I think people will just sort of jump back into their work and try and sort of push through it without sort of sitting there and being like, huh, that was actually very uncomfortable for my body. I think I actually need to recalibrate it so it doesn't, so I don't carry it with me for the rest of the day. And I think, unfortunately, the way that business operates and sort of the world operates is so focused on efficiency and speed and hustling and grinding, and that is in direct competition with looking after yourself. And
Yeah.
so I really sort of I think about it from that perspective where I'm like, how can I be a little bit kinder to myself? Because I wouldn't be expecting this from a friend or a loved one to be able to just bounce back. So why do I expect that from myself? And that was really one of the big things I started working and thinking about, sort of all of the things I would do to help cope with anxiety and depression and ADHD for all of the years that I was in therapy, and really sort of had to think out the box, because oftentimes it was like some of the things I didn't actually even know were symptoms of those challenges.
Mhm.
So I'm about to launch a program, and it's called 75 Calm. It's in direct opposition to 75 Hard, which is that workout program where you have to do all of these things, and if you miss a day, you have to restart it, and that just
Yeah. It
makes me
gives me anxiety just thinking about it, to be
yeah,
honest. Yeah.
100%. And I think that's the thing that I wanted to do the opposite. I've heard of like 75 soft trends where you like read a book and do like lovely things, which is great. But this is actually anchored specifically around all of the ways that you can support yourself in struggle to find more comfort every day.
Yeah.
And so it's a daily email. There are no rules, there are no requirements. It's just that you open the email, you read it, and you take what helps.
Oh my
Um,
God.
it's focused on, like there's a prompt of the day, so you can become more reflective on what's happening in
Yeah.
your world. There's a fact about your nervous system, because one of the things I operate on is I need to understand the why behind the what, otherwise I can't move forward. And
Mhm.
so understanding like, oh, this is my body's way of responding to stress and struggle. There's a support stack. So like several different things you can do to support yourself in that day, like a whole bunch of things that people might find valuable to focus on one thing, they might want to do the whole thing. There's also modification. So if you're having a particularly rough day, there's just a guidance to be able to say, try this thing. But
Mhm.
there's no shame, there's no judgment, there's no app, there's like none of the things, and there's no cost.
Hmm.
It's literally just my way of being able to share out what I know about anxiety, depression, grief, trauma, struggle, and be able to offer that to someone because I know in the moment when you are really deep in the trenches, sometimes like when people say move your body,
Hmm.
my idea of moving my body is terrifying when I'm like deep in dysregulation. And so having other things I can do is really important to be able to still continue to nurture myself through that process. Even just like there's one section that I focus on every day called coping versus processing. For me, when I'm deep in dysregulation, the idea of processing something feels way too hard and it gives me an excuse to avoid it,
Hmm.
as opposed to coping through it with helpful tools and things that are going to really nurture myself through that process. Processing's for later.
Hmm.
Processing's for when you actually can reflect on it and be like, huh, that was like that for a reason. Um, and so I'm really excited to launch it because for folks who are in the struggle, who are in therapy, who have medication, like, why isn't this working? This isn't a thing to replace it. It is not a get, better quick thing. It's just like the nervous system needs tons of repetition of small, consistent cues to tell it that it's safe. And
Yeah.
so this is my sort of offering to the world to
Mhm.
help because I know I wish I had it when I was going through it, and maybe this will help other people.
Wow, I love that. That is everything that I am all about. So I really appreciate you guys doing that. That's amazing. 75 calm, is that what you said? I can't wait. I can't wait to link that up in the show notes so everybody can look at that and look up for the Cubs as well. Because you're so right. Like we can pile on and pile on and pile on, but eventually the stress and is just going to affect our body to like I have Crohn's disease because I let stress do that. So finding those small little ways to just regulate your nervous system and be able to cope and then process, that's amazing. Thank you for doing that and putting that together.
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds amazing. So I will have everything linked in the show notes. But other than that, Amy, just you are a blessing to this world. So thank you so much. This was a great conversation, and I'm very grateful that you came on and shared this with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed chatting.
Yeah. And for you listeners out there, definitely go check out her stuff. The teddy bear is truly amazing, and she has all kinds of other good things on there for the Cubs. So choose yourself so you can take care of yourself and then help others. And I love you, and I'll talk to you next week.